Jessie is an average 12-year-old with an average life until she finds the mysterious Raystone. Hello and welcome to the Friday Fantasy Show from the Bottled Imp, exploring the realms of fantasy. My name is Ken Boyter, and today we're going to be taking a look at The Raystone by C.L. Gristwood. And this was first published in 2008, but this edition, it's a new edition with a new cover and a new textured cover as well. I do like this sort of, I don't know, it's kind of matte sort of textury cover. Love that. This one was published 2014 by Seventh Realm Productions. And before we go any further, I'm going to declare an interest. I do know the author. We've known each other for a few years now. We did a bit of a book swap because I gave her my book to read and I said I'd review her book. Now this is book 1. I believe there's 2 more in the series, book 2 and book 3. So without further ado, let's review The Raystone. The Raystone by C.L. Gristwood. As I say, I do know her, but that's not going to influence how I feel when I review anything that gets sent to us, obviously, because what would be the point in that? So the setup of the Raystone is pretty straightforward actually. There is a 12-year-old girl, her name is Jessie, and she's fallen on hard times. Her and her family have had to suffer bankruptcy. Her father's business has gone out of business and they've had to move, and they've moved into a really rough neighbourhood and she hates it, as you can imagine. They were, from the sounds of it, pretty well off. You know, they weren't massively rich, but they were comfortable, probably middle class. So she's having to mix with people that just have nothing in common with her. And that she goes to this new school, and her school friends, they're actually snobbish towards her. So, because they think, oh, you've got loads of money, and oh, you're better than we are, you come across as arrogant and all of that. But in actual fact, she's confused because she's like, well, she was looking forward to meeting new friends and, you know, making new friends at a new school. So she's very unhappy. She's not liking the neighbourhood and she's not liking the new school. And to top it all off, there's an incident that happens where she gets bullied. There's 3 or 4 of them, I think, and they start picking on her and bullying her on the way home from school. And luckily for her, though, somebody steps in to aid her. A boy called Chris. And he luckily knows a bit of karate. He's been going to karate lessons and he manages to fend them off. He doesn't really beat them up. He kind of just scares them off, fends them off a bit. And luckily for Jessie, they all run off, and therefore she's stopped being bullied. And Chris and Jessie, they start talking and they discover, yeah, they've got some things in common. He has just moved into the neighbourhood, and again, he's not really fitted in that well. He feels a bit of an outsider, a bit of a loner. And they discover they have a shared interest, shared love of the same music, which helps. So that is the sort of beginnings of a friendship. And that's pretty much the setup. Then what happens, just to give you a little bit more, we don't do spoilers, so I'm just going to give you a little bit more. There's a mysterious gemstone that they discover. It's called the Raystone. And they're confused by it because it just kind of appears. And they both touch it and they disappear. What? Yes. It's a sort of teleportation device, and they end up in a different realm that is similar to Earth, but not quite, because everything does seem a little bit off, just a little bit different. And there is magic, as you can imagine, being a fantasy book. And so that is it's then their quest to sort of get home, because there's no portal, there's no other stone on the other side. They're just dropped in this realm, in this place. And so they're learning about it as they go along. So they're just basically trying to find how to get back home. And that's the setup. And there's a number of themes that run through this book, for one of which is class. As I said before, there's the snobbery, but inverted snobbery. So it's very easy to think about class and think that if you're rich or you're upper class, that the obvious class struggle is, that they look down on poor people and the working class and all of that. No, it's actually the other way around. Or there's a fair amount of that. It's because if she's middle class, she isn't always going to fit in with their, the working class sort of way of thinking. But she was prepared to give it a go. It seems like the working class kids from her school, they didn't want to know. They thought that she was better than her, that she had an attitude. So the class is quite cleverly flipped on its head. It's not, so it delves into that side of class. And also another thing that runs through it is friendship. So therefore, if you have that inbuilt snobbery already, that kind of blocks you from meeting new people, because you're not going to be expanding your own horizons and kind of trying to mix with other people, which can do you a great service, because you can learn a lot from people that aren't necessarily from your social background. So you've got that sort of friendship element to it as well. There's also the building up of trust and the trust in friendship. Some people actually just give their trust to somebody right away, and then hopefully the trust isn't broken, but if it is, then it is. Some people, they need that trust to be built, so they don't automatically give you that trust. You will have to earn that trust. And that's kind of what happens between Jessie and Chris. There is that sort of inbuilt trust initially, because Chris just dives in and for want of a better word, saves her from being bullied. But that's more to do with his own need to correct injustice, because he didn't know Jessie to begin with. He might have been, stepping in and actually turned out Jessie's a horrible person. She isn't, but, he didn't know that. So he had this inbuilt sense of injustice that he needed to correct. And then from that, then the trust starts to build as they get to know each other. There's also the element in friendship of how much would you actually do for that person? How much are you willing to risk your own life or your own, problems, causing problems within your own life to actually help someone else, especially if you're just building up that friendship. And that's what happens continually, as I say. So Chris steps in initially, but then, again, I don't want to give any spoilers away, Jessie has to kind of step in and help Chris out along the way and save him. And so there's that kind of mutual trust and mutual friendship that then starts developing. And it's how much do you risk? How much do you dig deep? And I guess certain situations you might think you wouldn't help somebody, but actually when it comes down to it, yeah, you would. There's something just overrides your maybe initial feelings about stepping in and getting involved, because some people just don't know, I'm not going to get involved, it's too much hassle. So there's that element to the friendship as well. And also there's the acceptance. Friendship, it can be a little bit to do with tolerance and a little bit to do with acceptance of that person and who they are. Because not everybody's perfect, are they? Everyone's got flaws. So there's a little bit of acceptance that has to be bundled up into the whole friendship theme as well. And then we get a bigger theme that runs through it, which is good versus evil. So it's the bigger, wider theme, and that becomes personified in the form of the villains and the heroes. So a lot of the characters are quite distinct in, are they a villain, are they a hero, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means that you kind of know where you are with each character, which is a good thing in some respects, because you can then enjoy, you can revel in, if they're being villainous, yeah, let me see them be villainous. So you've got that wider aspect, which, is a very, it's like Lord of the Rings, there's a very strong element within fantasy of the bigger good versus evil. And the author doesn't really explore why someone's evil, they just are. It just happens that they are. So maybe in book 2 and book 3 we get to learn a bit more about the background of the villains in this piece. The fantasy elements, yes, as you could see from the cover, it's there's lots of magic going on. It does drip fantasy. Obviously you've got pretty much straight away you're into a new fantasy world, where everything is slightly different, and the rules, you're trying to discover what the rules are about this world and what actually the physics are and the magic and things like that. So the fantasy elements are strong. You've got just the teleportation device with the stone, the Raystone. You've got fancy creatures. There's quite a lot of different fancy creatures in there. There's also spellcasters, so magic does run through there, and it's not explained. There's no explanation of how the magic is developed, or how you gain magic, or how does that come to people who have magic. It just is there. And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I do personally like to know, I quite like it when authors go into the detail of the magic, but then I'm slightly guilty of that, because in my first book, The Legends of Grimace Ironblood, book 1, The Curious Bottle, I didn't necessarily delve into the magical system as well. But I am going to be doing that in the next book. So maybe the author has done that as well in the next books. The writing does zip along. It moves very quickly. There's a lot of pace to this, which is good. It's good, solid writing as well. There are a few typos, but then, I know this book is self-published, I'm self-published, and it's not always easy to find all the mistakes. In fact, I've read books that are published by big publishing houses, and there's typos in it as well. So there was only one or two, so it's totally acceptable level for self-publishing. I have read some self-publishing books where there's just typos all over the place, and it just needs a good editor or somebody to proofread it properly, and then you sort all that out. So luckily, that's not a problem in this book. The characterization is just enough to push forward and actually to care about the characters. If there was no characterization, then you just don't care. But there's just enough. I actually cared about the characters. I wanted to know what happens next. I wanted to know if they were going to get home or not. I wanted to know if they were going to survive. I wanted to know, just when they're pushed into corners, how they respond and how they react. I wanted to know the development of the Jessie and Chris storyline. That was a good, strong friendship. I wanted to know if that would last, or if it would be tested. So I like the characterization, and it is a bit story-led in places though, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It does zip along, and there are a few things that kind of happen as coincidence as opposed to it happens because of the character development. But again, it doesn't dominate. It is more character-led than not, but there is some bits in there where the story starts to take over, which again isn't a bad thing. And I guess because it's young adult, maybe it needs that. I mean, I'm not a young adult, as you probably gathered, so it's difficult to sort of sometimes put your head into a space of, of a 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old to know exactly what's going to encourage you to keep reading. But because of the pace, because of the characterization, and because of the story, it never sits, it never stops. There's enough, I think, that people will still be engaged, the young adults will be engaged in this. And you can feel the author's enthusiasm for the fantasy genre. There's a lot of Lord of the Rings influence here. There's Labyrinth in here as well, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and The Wizard of Oz. It's all kind of mixed in there, and that's not a bad thing to draw on what you're actually passionate about and what you loved, when you read fantasy. So I like that fact. I could feel the enthusiasm coming there. It also felt like a little bit of a comic book as well, a little graphic novel, just in the way that it sped along. So that's good. And all of that kind of jostles around. I could really feel it sort of jostling around, and it kind of creates something fresh. There's a freshness to this. There's a lot of energy in this book, which I liked. It is enjoyable fun. I did enjoy it. I mean, I'm an adult, and this is aimed at a younger age group, so I did actually enjoy it, and I thought the pacing of it and the characterization, and there's enough in there. There's enough story to keep it interesting and engaging, and it does tie up. So, there's a lot that ties up in this, but as I say, there is book 2 and book 3. So the author's found a way of actually carrying on the stories, and I like that. In fact, it's just reminded me of Jamie and the Magic Torch. I loved that as a kid, where he finds this magical realm with his torch, and he can just go back into it when he likes. So I'm assuming, I don't know this, but I'm assuming book 2 and book 3, they explore the nature of the Raystone and what it is and where it comes from and how it got there and why, has Jessie and Chris, found it. And can they control it? Is there power to it? Will they become, spellcasters? Can they learn to use magic? So there's a lot of leeway of where to go in the next 2 books. So I will be interested in finding out. I think that's the secret of a good fantasy book, is that you want to know what carries on after when the story is wrapped up. So I would definitely recommend this. It's a lot of fun. The characterizations are good. They're and I think if you are of that age group, 12, 10 to 14, you can definitely identify with this. Obviously, even though it does then go into a new realm. So yeah, I would definitely recommend The Raystone. The Raystone by C.L. Gristwood. Yes, as I say, if you're that age group, you will probably love it. As an adult reading it, I got a lot out of it, but I would definitely say it's more aimed for young adults. It's not necessarily a novel that crosses into the adult reading, but if you do happen to read it as an adult, you will enjoy it. And obviously if you've got children of this age group, they would love it. I do recommend it. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, we do other fantasy reviews, not just books. We do board games, we do films. We've also set up a Facebook group as well called the Bottled Imp Fellowship, so search for that on Facebook. We'll see you there. Until next time, fellow imps, remember to keep it unreal, especially if you're traveling to a different realm.